This episode of the Gentleman Scofflaw podcast is brought to you by Patreon and the Gentleman Scofflaw merchandise page. Go to gentlemanscofflaw.com. In the menu, click the support or shop links to help support the show.
You are listening to the Gentleman Scofflaw podcast. Listener beware.
Rise and shine, the liquor store is open. I ain't got time for moping. I best be on my way. Well, I still got time to save my reputation. Time to go day drinking in this dirty little town.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Gentleman Scofflaw podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Crowder. With me in person, as usual, is the Donovan Fowler.
Yes, I am.
And joining us all the way from the Great White North is Johnny Boy. By the way, this podcast for the Rebel and the Renaissance Man. How you guys doing?
Yeah, it is the Rebel and the Renaissance Man, despite what John is typing into the show notes.
Oh, gosh.
For trying to keep it lively.
For those of you
quite funny.
listening, we because John joins us from remote, we have a Google shared document for every episode that has all of the topics and questions and stuff we want to cover. And sometimes, while I'm doing the intro or in the middle of interviewing a guest, John likes to mess with us and starts typing inappropriate stuff into the show notes while I'm reading it. In real time.
The show notes become R-rated real fast.
Really fast. Let's start off with a bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into all the good stuff. I am smoking some. It's called Crowder's Blend, and my brother sent this to me. John David Cole, the Tobacco Jesus from Country Squire, made this custom blend for us. It is like it's like a kind of traditional vanilla. That's what vanilla kind of. I'd say maybe a little bit of rum. I don't know what exactly is in it, but there's more burley in it, so it's got more of a nicotine punch. So
Nicotine punch.
So that's what it is, and I'm smoking it in an old vintage a Fairmont. Is it a Fairmont pipe? Yeah, Fairmont pipe from LA's John's Pipe Shop in Los Angeles that no longer exists.
Bummer. Wait, where did that exist before it went out?
There's one down on Hollywood Boulevard way back when. I think it closed in the 70s.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
But I got it at a vintage shop.
Before my time.
What are you drinking there, John?
I have nothing to drink, but I do have a, what do you call these? The candy bracelet from Halloween.
The things that are like, I just remember as a child, those were extremely hard to eat. Very
the
difficult.
trick is, if you want to get the candy fast, is you break the string, you just pop it in, and
That's
it
a
just
good
slides.
point.
I used to just throw it into my mouth with the string, chew until all the candy was gone, and then I would just spit out the string. Like a cartoon character when they eat something with the bones.
Or you could end up swallowing it, and then you got all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I don't know. I've swallowed worse.
That's what she said.
And what do we got to drink there, Donovan?
Oh, my
Whoa.
Gosh, that was
That's why
unexpected.
I said to wait till we got.
I don't know. I took the cage off, and I didn't expect it to do that. For all of those listening, you just were privy to. So I was holding this wonderful. I don't even know how to pronounce this.
It says Quincanagari.
You're supposed to be able to read these fancy words. What is it?
I don't know that word. It's not a French word.
Quinquacentenary. Anyways, it's a 2017 vintage ale from our friends over at Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Our friend Trader Joe.
But you know who makes it? Is
Who?
Unibrew de Chambly in Montreal. Same people that make Fin du Monde.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
It's a dark ale brewed with spices and natural flavor. And it just, the cork, I was holding it off to the side. Luckily, I wasn't holding it pointed at my face. But it just popped off. It was a great moment. And now we're going to drink this son of a bitch.
And they come out, Trader Joe's comes out with this every year. You can only get it the months of November and December. And John you were talking about how you can't age beer. Actually, many people buy this and they cellar it and they keep it for years at a time because it only comes out in limited editions. It's different every year. And I guess if they store it in a cool, dark place, it'll last for a long time.
Smells
I'm so happy I was wrong.
I'll have to tell my dad about this because he likes to cellar beer like Scotch ales and stuff like that, which actually I think cellar pretty well too. We'll have some of those on the show coming up.
All right, and later on the show, we're going to have Major Scott Huesing, who is an author and a veteran, a former Marine. He wrote the
10
book...
deployments.
10 deployments. He wrote a book called Echo and Ramadi.
Yeah.
It's about to come out. So that'll be... he'll have some interesting stories, and this is Veterans Day weekend, so we thought it'd be a good idea to have a great guy like him on.
Our mugs are raised to... all the men and women who have served. Let's do a customary Scofflaw clink. There we go. And we drink to all of our men and women all around.
Thank you.
And even in Canada, you guys helped us, take the beaches in Normandy.
That's right. We were over there during World War II before you guys.
It's true.
Let's not forget who won the war, though.
Interesting tidbit. I think this is accurate. I think Canada had more soldiers per capita than any other nation in the Allied forces.
Interesting. I wish they would remember that. I wish Canada would remember that, and
no, we do a pretty good job with Remembrance Day up here.
Yeah, you guys do a good. What I love about Canada is their Remembrance Day parades. They're really solemn and they're just they're a great event to take your kids to learn, about what people had to do so that we can live the way that we do, so that we can be free. And
nothing teaches a 3-year-old about World War II like a Remembrance Day parade. And then the first 25 minutes of Private Ryan.
It's true. It's true.
It is not something they'll forget.
Did you say a 3-year-old?
Well, you got to get them
I'm
young.
not laughing at the content you said is true, but when I in my mind I'm thinking 3-year-old.
I remember seeing Saving Private Ryan on TV when I was 12.
Yeah, I remember it was a big deal because they weren't going to censor any of it.
Yeah, it was on ABC, and I think it was the first time it was aired, and I remember being horrified by the stuff that I saw. And now I look at it and it's it's still very impactful, but you do get a little bit deadened over time with all the stuff that's coming out. But
especially all you need to do is watch a couple Tarantino movies, and then you're like, oh well, that's not real.
That's not real.
How are you guys' weeks? Anything happen in your week, John?
Yeah, Johnny, what's going on with you?
He's still chewing the bracelet.
Jeez Louise.
All right. I watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off recently.
Yeah. Did you have a day off?
The dozenth time.
Dozenth? Only dozenth?
Really?
Dozenth? Is that a word?
I must have seen that movie like a few dozen times.
Oh, wow. Well,
you got to catch up.
You're behind the curve.
I am. I'm an amateur Bueller.
You're an amateur Hughes fan.
So, at the end of the movie when Ferris's sister gets confronted by Mr. Rooney in their house and she drop kicks him.
Yeah.
Well, they imply that she has no idea who he is, and then only realizes when she finds the wallet afterwards.
Yeah,
but how did she not recognize him?
That was a little bizarre. That was kind of a...
I will say this is the only hole in that plot you're concerned with.
Well, that and Pancreas. That whole Pancreas thing?
Oh, yeah.
Where he says, we had Pancreas, and it's all because they cut the scene where they ate Pancreas.
Oh, did they?
They did.
Oh, wow.
Fun fact for all you IMDb trivia hounds out there. No, but yeah, I'm trying to remember that part. Yeah, she kicks him, and then I don't. Yeah, basically.
Then she runs upstairs.
I think she probably figured it. She saw his face, right? Yeah, she saw his face. Yeah, so she probably figured it out afterwards and just thought he was a sexual predator nonetheless.
I understood that she only figured it out when she found his wallet.
That
Maybe
guy,
I'm wrong.
That guy, what the guy who played Rooney is a pedophile.
Is that
Other fun
What
fact.
was the story with that again?
I think actually he was arrested on child porn or something like that.
I think he's friends with Kevin Spacey.
I hate it sucks. Why do these actors have to be such terrible
and Pete
people who ruin
Townsend.
our favorite movies and ruin
Let's
the
just send them
lives
all
of
back to
everybody
K-Pax.
else? K-Pax. Oh my gosh.
K-Pax. Have you guys seen this story going around about Amazon? There was a couple that ordered a bunch of plastic storage bins from Amazon.
Oh, I see what you did here, package.
And when they received their bins, they found 65 pounds of marijuana inside.
Lucky them.
What did they pay for the bins?
I don't know. I'm sure. I don't know. Probably like $5 a bin or whatever those things are.
Well, then they got themselves
I love
a
how
deal.
in this article, they after they say they found 65 pounds of marijuana, the writer then says, "Now that's Amazon Prime."
Was this written by Gene Shalit?
Yeah, this almost sounds like an Onion article, but it's probably true.
And I read somewhere else in another article that apparently it was like worth, like its street value was like $130,000 or something. And they
like
tried
the
to
beginning of
return
the
it to
next-
Amazon, and I guess Amazon just gave him a gift card and said, keep the rest.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like this could be like the beginning of the next Breaking Bad. Like this unlikely couple just went in for storage bins, but then became drug dealers, the best drug dealers in suburbia.
I don't know what I'd do if that would happen, because like you'd be afraid, because you'd be holding a lot of drugs, and then you'd be like, okay, wait, how do I go about this to where I don't look like I'm guilty here?
Well, I think at that point you just call the cops as soon as possible.
Yeah,
because I mean, what else are you going to do? Like,
I
what
guess
else
you'd
are you
have a
gonna do?
record of it, because Amazon gives you step-by-step delivery record, and they would see when it
You
was
also-
time delivered to your doorstep and all that. You could say, hey, this just came in.
Yeah.
I have no idea what this is.
You also don't want it around when whoever was shipping it comes looking for it.
Well, that's
just
what
in
it, that's what it
case.
said too.
Just
is
in
that,
case Anton Chigurh
I
shows
know.
up at your house with a silent shotgun.
Well, they say that this couple actually left town for a couple of days because they didn't want the persons who it belonged to come looking for it and
Yeah.
them to be home,
That stands to reason.
which is crazy. What are you doing with your hand there, John? What's the
I'm
matter with
scratching my head. I might have to
Forget his
lice.
hand. What's the matter with his face?
That's what I mean. Like, what's with your? No, I was going to say, what's wrong with your finger?
Oh, I have a bit of a cyst on my fingertip. It's I think the technical term is peronochial, or maybe something completely
No,
different.
that's a nose condition where if you lie too much, it starts to turn into a broomstick.
Oh gosh,
I'm here all night.
you're making
Ladies
all
and
the
gentlemen.
dad.
strings to
These are
hold
the
me
dad
down.
jokes.
Oh, it's some sort of a growth that has pus in it that I tried to.
You popped it.
I popped it last night, and
What'd you pop it with?
a sewing needle that I heated over a flame and
Nice.
then wiped with alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, the flame,
figure-
the heating it doesn't really do anything. It's just to sterilize it.
Well, yeah, that's the idea, isn't it?
I know, but like I remember, like somebody
More
was
from
like,
Dr.
I helped a
Crowder
friend.
next week.
I had a friend that was like insisting on using fire, but he had already wiped it off with alcohol, and I was like, it's the same thing. You just sterilized it.
It's just a double whammy.
My idea was I'm going to sterilize it twice just to be safe because I already have an infection.
I mean, who knows where that sewing needle's been? I mean, it's, yuck.
So the interesting thing is, at the doctor's office, I learned that my doctor has released an album of some sort.
Oh, really?
And the way I know this is he started stacking them right next to me while I was sitting there waiting for him. And
So you'd have to ask him about it.
I had to ask him about it, and yada yada
That's
yada.
why
$20 later.
That's all you know. You just don't.
I have a CD that I can't play because I don't have a CD player.
Oh no!
So,
So you were forced to buy. You were cornered to buy your doctor's CD.
it's extortion. I'll tell you that.
Why
And-
would you sell a physical CD this day and age? I feel like people don't seem to like. It's always like the amateurs that are doing that still.
Well, I guess if he said, if you go online and you could buy my album on iTunes, no one would buy any. But if you're stacking CDs next to your patients for 8 hours a day, every day.
Oh gosh. So do you think he does that with every patient? He starts stacking them and goes, and then people go, "What's that?" He goes, these are nothing. These are just my albums.
Absolutely.
See, I think part of this is on you because you actually asked him.
Yeah.
You should have just.
You shouldn't have taken the bait.
You should have just kept it professional, man.
But then what if he, gave me the wrong antidote to the finger problem?
Well, the CD would have had nothing to do with it. It would have just been because he hated your face.
I don't know that.
So you felt you weren't going to get the proper medical attention you needed if you didn't buy the CD.
Correct.
Well, that is extortion, right? So,
but if my finger does get fixed and all it cost me was $20 on a CD, that I looked up some of the songs on YouTube, it's not that bad.
You actually listen to it? Like it's his songs you can listen to?
Yeah, it's win-win.
Win-win? Oh, well, that's cool. Well, why don't you give him a plug then?
No, I'm not going to do that.
So we can't listen to it on Spotify? All right.
Can't have him on. We should have him on to play live for us on Skype.
Oh man. But yeah, so I mean, did they have to give you a shot or anything for the infection for like antibiotics or anything or?
No, I'm on penicillin pills, which interesting side note, if you burp just after taking one, it tastes like you ate mothballs.
Yeah.
Oh man. That's ridiculous. That's probably not good for you. It can't be good.
Not good for your taste buds, anyways.
All right, let's go to a little segment we like to call
Listener Mail.
All righty, guys. We got some mail this week. And for you, the listener, if you want to interact with the show, you could join us on social media, iTunes, Facebook, Instagram, any one of those platforms. You could send us a message. You could also leave us a review on iTunes, which not only helps give us some stuff to talk about on the show and to read on the show, but also helps with our search rankings. So if you want to help support the show, that's one way you can do that. Johnny boy, what does iTunes have for us this week?
All right, this one is 5-star rated by Taylor Brigham. He says, this podcast is great. It makes me want to smoke my pipe every time I tune in. I don't always indulge, however. You guys have successfully brought me to the purchase of new tobacco from the Country Squire and completely changed the way I remove the hairs from my face. Thanks to the Razor Emporium and Phoenix Shaving. If you guys could not invite anyone who specializes in so obscure and very expensive hobby, that would be great because I would inevitably find myself inspired and hooked. Your gentlemen and scofflaws.
Oh man, that's. We hope you're not wasting all your money on hobbies.
But at the same time,
Well, it sounds like he hasn't wasted a dime. He's bought some very, useful and
It's true.
effective instruments.
But
being a man.
Our legal team will tell you that we're not liable for any money wasted on any obscure items. So they'll come crying to us.
Well, thank you, Taylor, and we'll try to avoid having people come on that'll, trigger your expensive hobby habits. If you guys wanted to have another hobby, what would it be? A hobby you don't pursue yet. You guys have any?
Scuba diving.
Scuba diving, that'd be a good one.
Sailing, but I'd probably die at sea. I'm not very good at directions.
I feel like woodworking would be fun.
Did you ever watch Band of Brothers? Woodworking would be great.
Yeah.
If you have a lathe, that's all you really need.
That's all you need to get started.
Wait a minute. Let me close out that thought because otherwise it's going to sound really weird that I just plugged Band of Brothers. Where I was going with that is that in the wrap of that series, which is, of course, a great series, one of the guys who you've gone through this entire journey with, he's giving kind of like the stories of where they all went, kind of very much like in The Sandlot, right?
Yeah.
And one guy, he's he's like, he went back to college and finished off his degree and then wrote a book about sharks. And then it's like, and then he says, one day he went out to sea and nobody ever saw him again. And then it just stops right there and goes on the next guy. It's just like, I think it's, I'm trying, Webster. That's the guy out of that group. But that, it just would be, I figured it's like, okay, that pretty much makes sense. But I thought that would have been me if I was a sailor. That probably would have been me.
All right.
Moving on.
Yes, let's, Donovan, you want to read that YouTube comment?
Sure. There will be some bleepage here, but no worries. Rob B says, "Are all the Crowders fucking hilarious? LOLOL. Your father has some good semen. Wait."
Oh gosh.
That is that's well, I can see why you didn't want to read that.
Thank you for that comment, Rob.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know.
You're gonna pass that along to your dad.
I don't know if I would agree. I don't know if I would agree with that. I don't know. Well, I guess
think you just want
it's
no
it's
comment.
A lose-lose.
It's just
It's a lose-lose.
no comment.
No comment on that one.
No comment on that comment.
Let's go to a listener voicemail, and if you want to leave listener voicemail, you can call the phone number man81scoff with 2 Fs, and leave us a message for a chance to get played on the show. All right. Here we go. Let me play this.
This ought to be good.
Hi, I have a question in the form of a riddle for you guys. If a scofflaw could scoff laws, which law would you scofflaws scoff? Answer me that one. Riddle me that.
Okay, can we also, just for kicks, read the translation of what he's saying on Google that Google translated?
Okay.
We can just read it and then we can cut it out if it doesn't work.
All right, let's
it says, "Hi, I have a question in the form of a riddle for you guys. So far, so good. If Scott could stop laws, which law, LA, just LA law, would you stop loss? Answer me that one." Real meal at.
Oh man.
That's why AI is never going to conquer us.
Never.
They can't understand the intricacies of the human voice.
What law would you scoff? Of a scoff, like what laws are you scoffing any laws right now?
Am I scoffing any laws right now? I won't comment on that one. But if I had a law that I would scoff, what?
I guess I scoff at the law every time I smoke my pipe out on the patio.
Oh yeah, smoking. Well,
that's technically illegal.
Yeah.
In California, in my neighborhood, and being that close to the building.
I wouldn't get a smog check.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Then they deny my registration and I'd get shot by the police.
What would you scoff at, John, or are you scoffing any laws?
Oh boy, I'm hesitant to incriminate myself.
Yeah, don't incriminate yourself. Or as our legal team will say, do not incriminate yourself on this podcast. We can't help you.
I would probably scoff something petty and mundane just for kicks.
Like
zoning laws. I totally scoff those laws.
That's right. If I built an extension, I would put it like an inch too close to the next property.
Yeah.
There you go. It's the kind of
these are really lame scoff laws. Like people like during Prohibition.
Well, let's put it this way. Well, I guess
the actual original scoff laws.
Yeah,
there's
true.
much more at stake for them. I guess.
I feel like we. There are some serious laws I could mention scoffing, but like I said, I don't want to make myself a target for certain.
John's going to mismeasure on purpose.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll keep it G in terms of breaking the law on this podcast. But
wait,
yeah.
what do you mean G?
Also,
are you thinking of like? You're not thinking of like some Harvey
Don't pull a
Weinstein
hollow,
stuff.
man.
No, come on, you get your mind out of the gutter.
All right,
I'm thinking like founding fathers kind of stuff. But that being said, I also do like to go. I have gone over 100 miles an hour in my car on occasion, and that's been fun.
Oh gosh.
But it's dancing with the devil at that point. You're not just scoffing the laws. You're
All right, let's go to a quick break, and we'll be back with Major Scott Huesing of Echo and Ramadi. I wanted to take a second to talk to you about Patreon. Now, if you've never heard of Patreon, basically it's a platform for creators, for patrons who are fans of a given creator to help support their creations. So we have a Patreon page for the Gentleman Scofflaw podcast. You could support the show for as little as $1 an episode, which is like what? This is just cheaper than a Starbucks coffee, right? So maybe give up one. Why does everyone always do that? They say it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. Okay, what else do you spend $1 on? Maybe it's cheaper than buying Q-tips. Maybe you don't need Q-tips for the month. Maybe this month you avoid Q-tips, right? I don't know. I mean, I hear they're bad for you anyway, but maybe that's not true. I don't. Maybe don't sacrifice anything related to health for the $1 an episode. But Patreon is great because you, the patron, also gets rewards for joining the Patreon. So examples of stuff that we have are extended interviews and outtakes, stuff that gets cut out of the episode that you don't hear for time's sake, because we try to keep a tight, entertaining show, and sometimes there is some gold that doesn't make the final cut. So you get to listen to some of that. Also, you get behind-the-scenes videos, photos, and bonus episodes. For example, we did a bonus episode at the Big Shave West, which was a lot of fun. So more of those type of things are coming, as well as monthly live video hangouts where you can interact with us in person, which is a lot of fun. We've done a couple of free ones to test it out, and it's been a lot of fun. We get to talk with the listeners in real time and get to know them, and they get to ask questions, and it's always a good time. And here's the pièce de résistance is when we hit our goal mark, we are launching a whole new movie review podcast, a Gentleman Scofflaw movie review podcast. Since we're all of us on the show are writers and filmmakers, and that's our background. We love movies. We're going to go through a catalog of what we think are either gentleman or Scofflaw-esque movies. So if you join, you'll get that show as well. Everyone who joins on Patreon at any one of the tiers, even at the $1 an episode, gets a free Gentleman Scofflaw vinyl sticker, which is super cool. It's like a full color sticker. It's really sticky. You could stick it on, anything you want to stick it on. Also, you'll get thanked on the air for your support. So check out patreon.com/gentscofflaw, or you could go to gentlemanscofflaw.com and click the support link on our menu, and it'll take you right there. We look forward to seeing you on Patreon, and thank you for supporting the show. All right, I'm excited to have this guest, Major Scott Huesing, author of an upcoming book, Echo and Ramadi. Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the program.
Yeah. I'm excited. I was looking at this book, and it looks like it's a fascinating story. But let's start out by giving our listeners a little kind of background about you, why you joined the Marines, and how you got started in your career.
Sure. I joined the Marines just out of high school in 1989. I didn't, much like your bio on the Scofflaw page we were talking about earlier, I didn't have a stellar GPA and barely squeaked out of high school. And throughout my young, unsupervised life, I didn't have a lot of guidance or discipline, really. So didn't do too well. Then a friend of mine introduced me to the Marine Corps, and I'd kind of led this lifestyle of high-risk behavior, even as a young child, like taking ridiculous stunts from my brother, jumping off of roofs and BMX and, being dragged down alleys behind the car in the winters of Chicago area. And so I was very attracted to the Marine Corps. They seemed like the biggest group of risk takers, and it seemed like a natural fit to me. So I enlisted and served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then decided I really needed to focus on getting an education. So I went to college, and I fared much better than I did in high school. And I attribute that really to the discipline that I gained as a young Marine. And it really helped me succeed in college. And I graduated in 3 years, got my commission as an officer in the Marine Corps, as in the infantry. And after serving 24 years, both enlisted and commissioned, that was kind of my career path. And throughout those 24 years, I conducted 10 deployments to over 60 different countries worldwide, and some of the worst and some of the better spots of the world. But it was the path that I wound up taking, and I don't have any regrets looking back. That's for sure.
Traveling that much, you must learn a lot from meeting people in different parts of the world. And, what kind of, do you have any stories of being, serving and meeting people, meeting civilians and stuff, and the kind of work you do? Because that's always my favorite stuff to hear about people in the military when they're serving overseas.
The best part about being in the military, one of the greatest aspects, is obviously the travel. But moreover, it's the men and women that you serve with, because they make up such a small percentage of the American population that are willing to serve their country. Yeah. And you're surrounded by this amazing demographic of people. And one of the things I write about is in my book, Echo and Ramadi, was it's not that the Marine Corps has the most lethal warriors on the battlefield, or how straight they shoot, or how they attack and kill the enemy with unbridled ferocity. It's the fact that it's also comprised service-wide of artisans and poets and musicians and singers and painters and yes, sometimes writers. And good leaders really know how to tap into that. And if you understand that, it really makes you a better unit, a more cohesive unit. So when you're out there, whether doing exercises or deployed to combat zones, which I've been in both on multiple occasions, you do meet a lot of the local people, and it's a very life enriching experience, because even in some of the worst conditions, like in Ramadi, Iraq in 2006 and 2007, which was the deadliest city in Iraq at the time, you were still immersed with the local populace. And to say that what is portrayed on the mainstream media of local Iraqis or Afghani citizens in either theater during this long war, they're not representative of the entire culture. There were some absolutely fine people who were committed to their country and patriotic of the land that they had, been born in and grew up in, and they treated us well. There were times when they gave us hot chai when we were cold and flatbread out of the kindness of their hearts. So you meet all types of different people, even in the worst conditions created by humanity in combat. So I take those with me as something that are very special to me as I look back on not only the worst parts, but there were also some, really great parts.
Let's talk a little bit about Echo and Ramadi, your book, and why did you write it, and what's the story? What was the process of putting that together?
Well, Echo and Ramadi is the story of brotherhood and shared adversity, and it's the story of a U.S. Marine Corps infantry company during the Second Battle of Ramadi. It is a 10-month snapshot in time that's graphically depicted, that I share the excitement known only to those who survived the intense urban combat during the Second Battle of Ramadi in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And the reason I wrote the book was to honor the sacrifices and spirit of my Marines and the families that supported us while we fought, and that still continue to support us this day, our Gold Star families that I am inextricably connected to. And it is my tribute to them And I'm honored and humbled to tell this great story so readers do feel the pain and emotion and laughter at some of the worst times and the intensity and friction that I try to describe in unvarnished detail throughout this story. I was very fortunate throughout the process of writing the book, not only to wind up at a great publishing house like Regnery that really feels passionate about telling such great stories like this, but throughout the process of writing the book, it began as this outlet for me to, one, tell a significant epic battle that occurred in Ramadi, but also to serve as another portal for my Marines to heal. And although the stories and the characters in Echo and Ramadi, Jordan, are singular in nature, they're very emblematic of what all Marines and all soldiers deal with on the battlefield and some of the personal experiences that they have to go through when they fight and also when they return home, and dealing with some of the tragic effects of post-traumatic stress and the tragedies that have followed, and the sad number of Marines we've lost to suicide because of the facts of what they saw on the battlefield and all of those things that they will never be able to unsee, so to speak. And that's a very, very harsh reality that although we're getting better, we've got better mediums and organizations to help veterans with post-traumatic stress. I think that we cannot forget that there are always veterans in need, and any of your listeners that want to help, they can help. And sometimes it's just by listening to a veteran or becoming engaged in some charities that help veterans. I'm also very fortunate to be the executive director of Save the Brave, which is a certified nonprofit. None of us take a single penny for salary. It's all 100% to veterans. And if they're interested, they can go to that website as well at www.savethebrave.org. And it's not always about writing a big check to help veterans, although we do like those too. It's, a lot of times it's just giving of your time and really putting some skin in the game and giving a Saturday to go volunteer or help at an event or participate in an event. I think those are really some of the most meaningful contributions that those that haven't experienced combat, those that haven't experienced a life in the military, that really want to give back to our nation's veterans. Those are great ways to do that. And there's plenty of nonprofits out there doing so many great things. It makes me proud to be a veteran and proud to continue to support our nation's heroes through what we do with our work with Save the Brave. And that is to connect veterans through outreach programs to just build strength of character. That's our mission. And we do that in numerous ways to help these young men and women. And so it's a great thing. And at the end of the day, it's really what makes me happy.
That's awesome. And with the holidays coming up, are there ways to help families of people that are overseas serving? I mean, I feel like having a dad overseas serving makes it probably pretty difficult for Christmas.
It does. I've missed more than my share of holidays throughout my 10 deployments in the Marine Corps. But any of your listeners to the program can reach out to a local military base. They can contact the USO. They can go online and find plenty of ways to support veterans that are deployed overseas, but also reach out to the family groups that are still here that are missing their loved ones overseas. And also, I mentioned my Gold Star family, Gold Star families are those moms and dads and brothers and sisters that have lost their son or daughter or brother or sister in combat. And they cannot be described as ordinary people. They are this group of extraordinary people, this group and this family that I'm so connected to, that continue to love us so much despite their loss. And if you really talk about helping and being connected to those in need, at the holidays. The holidays are really tough times for our Gold Star families, and they cannot be forgotten.
No.
They're just such an important part, because we who went through the chasm of war, those that fought, those of us that have served and put on the uniform and sacrificed, we did that willingly. We took an oath, we stepped up to the plate, and we knew what we were getting into. But the Gold Star families, they lost.
Mhm.
They didn't make that choice. So there's a lot of great opportunities to stay connected and really support our Gold Star families, and really highlight their contributions of breeding a great generation of Americans that are willing to put on the uniform, unfurl their cape and defend our freedom. It's just an amazing group of people. And I'm so proud that I call so many of them my friends to this day. They're always there for me, no matter when I pick up the phone or what do I need, or if they need something. It's just an amazing network that we share that will be eternal.
You mentioned kind of like the way things are portrayed in the media. I feel like everything is so, when it comes to war, like everything is so black and white. Like if I'm looking back on like the Iraq War, being in college and thinking of what was going on then, and all the protests on college campus and all that stuff, they always made it seem like we were like this imperialist enemy that was going into these countries, and they just hated us and wanted us out all the time, which and then I hear from guys that have served that are like, oh no, they were, we had relationships with these people and these civilians, and we were helping each other out. And it was this very symbiotic relationship. It's not like, good guy, bad guy kind of, I don't know, from what you see like in movies or in the media and stuff.
Yeah. It's not, I don't know if I'd use the term symbiotic. I'm sure that nobody appreciated us being there. And what's interesting is, to make a comparison, which I like to do often, is most Americans cannot fathom what the Iraqi people have had to go through as we tried to fight and purge their country of the insurgency and murderous regime that was trying to take hold there. If an American could possibly fathom having their house raided at 3:00 in the morning, being awakened and their entire family marshaled into one room, and then a squad of heavily armed Marines going through, ransacking their house, looking for weapons and contraband. It's just something that you can't comprehend. No. It's something that most Americans only see on a good episode of Cops, and they just would never be able to understand that. But these people tolerated this because they were also subjected to the brutality and intimidation of the insurgency throughout the long war in Iraq and Afghanistan, because the common tactic for the insurgents was to go into homes, stash their weapons, AK-47s, machine guns, IED making material for roadside bombs, and threaten the locals and say, hey, Jordan, you're going to keep this stuff for me. You're going to keep it safe, and you're not going to tell the Americans where it is, or we're going to come back and kill you.
Wow.
And that's a double-edged sword. So when we come in and we find it, and I find a pile of AKs in your broom closet, Jordan, I'm going to think you're helping the insurgents, right? But it's not always the case, because most of the time they didn't even know how to insert a magazine into the weapon. So we knew that they were kind of victims, so to speak, of the insurgency, and that was a challenge for not only me as a seasoned commander who'd done multiple combat tours already, had 35 years of life experience, but to that young 22-year-old sergeant or corporal who has to deal with that type of dynamic on an urban battlefield under some of the most extreme conditions. That's a challenge to identify who are the bad guys and who are the good guys. At the end of the day, we our methods and tactics, we figured out a way to quickly identify who the bad guys were, who needed killing and who didn't. And that's where the science becomes an art, so to speak, as you operate in an area for an extended period of time. Yeah.
It seems like a lot of these in the Middle East, the wars are different than the wars of yesteryear. There's a lot of like having to decipher who's who's the bad guy and who isn't, and their tactics aren't conventional. Like when you read, like, about World War II or like old, the wars of yesteryear, it seems like it must be very difficult to navigate.
It is. It's a very fluid, very dynamic environment when you're talking about an unconventional war. Unconventional warfare is designed that way to go against a heavily armed force like the U.S. military, because at the beginning and at the end of the day, they know that they don't have the military might, training, or firepower to go toe-to-toe with an organization like the U.S. Marines or the U.S. Army that wields such a heavy sword. So you have to adapt and find tactics. And the one thing that they always had on their side in any insurgency, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan or the Horn of Africa, is they have time on their side because they live there. They're willing to wait us out. And as advanced as our technologies would become through use of sensors or electronics or precision weaponry, thermal optics, they would become more adept at the rudimentary tactics of waiting us out or not using communication devices and burying small notes in the ground, just like they did during the Revolutionary War, which was, akin to, what we experienced as we were fighting for our independence in America. Yeah. So the only difference is the insurgency didn't belong in Iraq. The locals didn't want them there. They wanted us to purge. So there was some degree of, I would say, a symbiotic relationship that they had. They wanted us there. They knew that at the end of the day, the Marines and the soldiers were there to purge that country of the insurgency. And they also knew that they couldn't rely on their local police force because it had become so corrupt and so dismantled that there was just no one to trust. And at the end of the day, we were the most honest brokers on the battlefield, because although the Marines fought day in and day out in 2006, it wasn't a matter of if we were going to get engaged with the enemy in firefights. It was when and how often. Sometimes we would be engaged in firefights 2, 3, 4 times a day, up to 5 hours at a time. There were some of the most grueling battles during the Second Battle of Ramadi in 2006 that we'd experienced to date. But they also knew that we were there to protect them, and that was something that they found out as we not only fought with lethality but also honor. And the Marines were carried that ethos with them as they fought. And it makes me extremely proud of these young men and women that fought with me and that continue to fight. I mean, they're still there. We're still engaged in Iraq. We're still engaged in Syria. So although the tax plan and everything that's going on and the horrific aftermath of the Texas shooting that we all see in the news today, there are still men and women downrange that are protecting the freedoms that we enjoy every single day. And they're just not getting the coverage that they deserve. Even if it was just a weekly segment, I would be a little bit satiated that the mainstream media was doing their job to cover down on the brave acts and the sacrifices that our Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and the families that are sacrificing, back here while their loved ones are deployed. If they got some coverage, it would make me a little bit happier.
Yeah. Well, and if I read earlier this week correctly, I think ISIS just recently either lost one of their last strongholds or the last stronghold that they had in Syria, which is, like the fact that, ISIS is starting to be, taken out is amazing. And like you said, that's a huge testament to the work that you did and to the work that our men and women are doing over there with the Iraqi, forces. I had a question. So you said you were able to eventually, kind of tell who was good and who was bad. How did that process go? Because when you talk about even getting flatbread from the locals and food and things like that, after a while, I feel like initially when I hear that, I think how could you trust, that the people who are, around you are actually rooting for you as opposed to like trying to poison you or like, even trying to get intelligence or whatever. So how did that process go in that unconventional way of warfare that you were actually able to tell the bad from the good?
Well, let's talk tactics first. Is how we figured it out in certain portions of the town is, yes, we were fighting an ununiformed enemy. They blended in very well with the local populace. They, like I said, they would slip into a local home. They'd grab their weapons. They'd take a couple not so well aimed shots at a Marine or Army patrol. They'd ditch the weapons, then slip out the back door and blend right back in with the populace. So it took a while to figure out what the routine was, how to respond to that, and who the bad guys were. And there was one story I tell that I'll share with you is we were in the western part of Ramadi. One of my young Marines calls me up to the rooftop and says, "Hey, sir, you got to get up here." So I run up to the top of the roof. He hands me a set of binoculars and he goes, "Look across the street over there where we're receiving sporadic small arms fire." So I pick up the binos and I look through and I see the guys running back and forth. And he says to me, Do you see? They're wearing running shoes underneath their dish dasha, or their man dress, as the Marines like to call it. So I looked, I said, "That's it. They're wearing running shoes." And it kind of made sense, right? No insurgent wants to get into a firefight with a team of badass Marines wearing flips. Like, you don't want to go out. There's a few ways you don't want to go out. You don't want to go out while you're in the bathroom, or you don't want to be wearing flip flops while you're fighting the Marines. So that's a bad day. So we figured that out, and trust me, they weren't all wearing Adidas running shoes, but
sure.
There was again, it's kind of where art meets science in trying to figure out how they fought. To your question about the locals, we were very fortunate too that we had a group of interpreters along with us as we went out on every patrol, and these young citizen warriors were some of the most amazing people that I not only met, but were so impactful to me, Donovan, that I wrote about it in my book, Echo and Ramadi. There's an entire chapter about my interpreters, because these 18, 19-year-old kids who had been victims of the insurgency found a way, and the only way they knew, to strike back against the insurgency and redeem some respect. And what they had lost was to join the American forces and become interpreters in country. And they took tests and they joined our ranks, and they were very helpful at determining who the friendlies were on the battlefield, who the people we could trust. And they really allowed me as a commander to gauge my reactions to some of the situations we were thrust into in some of the most hellish situations on the battlefield. And I'm eternally grateful to these, young men and women that we had attached to our company of over 250 Marines as we fought daily in the city of Ramadi. They're just extraordinary. And a couple of them are some real success stories that I write about as well, who are now U.S. citizens. But I don't want to give it all away. You got to read all about it. They're just amazing people, and they are akin to the patriots of our Revolutionary War, to use that same example, because they fought and defended what they knew what was right at the end of the day. And it did take us a long time to figure that out, because there is a rapid turnover in the rotation of forces in country. They had time on their side, so we had to quickly figure out what our battle rhythm was going to be. But what's important too, for your listeners to understand, whoever listens to the program in general, is that our whole methodology, you were talking about ISIS, Donovan, and how it was no secret in 2015 that they took Ramadi as the capital city of Al-Anbar province. It's for a reason, because it is the capital city. So they took hold of Ramadi, and slowly but surely over the past two and a half years, we've rooted them out systematically through a very deliberate process. And I think that's maybe in part because we don't have all the mainstream media coverage, because the American people, they want everything fast, right? We're a fast fast food nation. We want fast food. We want quick, fast at our ATM machines. We want fast democracy. And this is something we try to impose on a culture that's been around for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
So again, it was American hubris at its best, thinking we were going to impose our will, our meager 250-year existence on a 5,000-year-old culture overnight. It just was not practical. And the fact that we pulled out and we didn't leave a significant footprint over in that region, I think was not helping further our end state. When people ask me about, well, do you feel you won? And I tell them that I never really had a solid metric for success of win or lose. If it was a matter of how many insurgents we killed on the battlefield, I'd say, yeah, we won. We absolutely killed more bad guys than we lost Marines. But the true metrics of success for me was bringing as many Marines home alive as I possibly could through our training and tactics and leadership. Not just me, but even at the lowest level, we had some of the best leaders at the platoon and squad level that I was fortunate to have, because a lot of the sergeants and corporals that filled the ranks in Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, had fought in Ramadi 18 months before we went back into the town, and they had a lot of experience. So I was pretty lucky to have that on my side.
Seeing combat, obviously, for people that haven't seen it, what's that like? What does that do to your psyche? It must be hard coming back into the civilian world after going through so much of that. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like being on the battlefield, but I think it's helpful to try and learn to be able to appreciate what you guys have done.
Well, it is hard to articulate, and I did my best to describe in my book Echo and Ramadi the pain and the feeling and the emotion and what I describe as the friction of combat. And it's not a story of events or things. I think if you want to read about events or things, you pick up the newspaper.
Yeah.
What I like to focus on is that visceral feeling to the individual. And I conducted over 85 personal interviews during the course of writing this story, recording and taking notes to ensure that every detail was checked for accuracy. And it wouldn't have been the same story had I written it 10 years ago, because of the fact that it has taken almost a decade for that pain to abate for most of the Marines, and for the families to process and come to grips with everything that we dealt with in combat and the aftermath of a war that followed. Because I think the interviews really would have been different. The stories would have been repressed, probably tainted by the Survivors Guild. So the experience of combat is it's not a natural event, first and foremost. It's something that humans create, and it's often created by those that sit in blind pronouncement behind desks in government offices, but they'll never have to experience that type of savagery that it encompasses, or the emptiness that it leaves in its absence, both in the minds and the souls of those that fight. It's just this unrelenting tide that swells and crashes as you're immersed in this situation. But it's a very real thing. Combat is severe in its most extreme form, and that reality of combat for those that fight, it tends to escape the senses if you're not in it at the moment, being shot at or blown up or mortared or whatever else. That simply just becomes part of that daily friction that surrounds you, and the repetitiveness and the boredom and the chaos and the horror of it all. It can't exist. But the training that we receive prepares us for that. It insulates us to a degree, but that friction still exists. And for your listeners who have not experienced that type of combat, it just doesn't seem real. I mean, for me and for many, it doesn't seem real until you look the parents of a 19-year-old Marine in the eye and, have to express your sympathies for the death of their son, who is ultimately your responsibility. And it's not easy to kill another human being, not for anyone. And I don't care how romanticized or cavalier it's portrayed in fiction or on television or in movies. It's a horrific, life-changing action for most. But in war, killing is what happens. And Marines are trained to kill. And they do it well because they're the best our nation has to offer. And that's something that we continue to struggle with as we leave the battlefield. But I think that what's important is the preparation that we give our young men and women in training is the best that we can offer. And they're never without great leadership and each other. And that's really why they fight. It's not for the numbers on the scoreboard at the end of the game. It's fighting for each other and doing what's right and really helping those that can't help themselves. That's the true spirit of what Marines do.
Yeah. One thing that I, at least in my personal life, in the last year or so, that I've been trying to grow is definitely in discipline. And that seems to be a thing that I keep coming across. I listen to a lot of Jocko Willink's podcasts and stuff, and it seems like just like being in the military definitely creates a sense of duty and a sense of discipline that a lot of civilians or just a lot of people in my generation just don't have. I mean, do you have any tips for people in terms of like what you've learned in the military and how that could apply to people outside of the military to just kind of be more efficient in life or as better leaders, as better citizens?
Well, I had the comparative upbringing from leading a life of high risk behavior, and getting in fights and speeding tickets and running from the cops and all through high school, and then joining the Marine Corps to this lifestyle of regimented, disciplined behavior, probably the most disciplined culture known in America for certain, if not the world. But it absolutely was probably something I was lacking as a young child growing up. So I was fortunate to apply what the Marine Corps had taught me over my 24 years in service. And it's a lifestyle choice that you have to make. And, Jocko is another great example of that. And I'm a friend and follower of his podcasts, and I love looking at his watch every day on Facebook.
Yeah.
31. I'm like, the first thing that pops in my head, I'm like, Jocko, what time do you go to bed?
Yeah.
Is he going to bed at 8:00? Because I don't know. But I love him, and I was just with he and the rest of the extreme team down in San Diego a couple months ago. For
the muster.
I
saw
pictures. I didn't participate, but I went down to say hello to a couple of the guys, and Jocko and his team fought in Ramadi during the same time as I did in 2006.
Tuscan Bruiser.
We were kind of ships passing in the night, but his latest book, Discipline Equals Freedom, his field manual, is another great guidebook for people that are looking for a start point too. It's just, he gets it, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to make it easy about the tenet of discipline. It's not, I think he describes it as, there's no such thing as self-discipline. It's just discipline. You have to want to do it. And the times when you think you can't do it, those are probably the times you should be doing it. I think is, to paraphrase Jocko, is it's really spot on. And it's something that I've adapted in my own personal lifestyle too, is that you have to be disciplined, and you have to know what your limitations are. You also have to know what your weaknesses are, and whether it's some of it, maybe food, fatty foods. Sometimes it might be, alcohol.
That Domino's pizza tracker, man.
Fast, but those are things that I have control over. As I talk to people, we talked a little bit earlier about the experience of combat and what that's like, and the aftermath, and how you process that mentally. But for me, it's not the fighting or the shooting or the killing or the destruction and seeing the worst things that humanity has to offer. I don't have nightmares. I don't lament over the dead. That's not what bothers me. It's really the absence of that friction, the absence of that high risk lifestyle that I was surrounded by my entire life, and not having those inputs are really something that I think personally I've had to assess in my life to make adjustments. And I think it's a lot of other veterans, things that they struggle with as well. Whether it's vices, alcohol or food or anxiety, whatever it is that they're dealing with, they have to understand that, one, it's okay to hurt, and it's okay to heal. Yeah. That's the first thing. And that I learned this through age and wisdom, that no one's perfect, and I'm not perfect. And there's been times when I've slipped, because that's life. Mm-hmm. Life is slippery, and there's inevitable points in your career and your life that you lose traction, you slip, and you'll fall. And for me, that was not an easy process to share those times in my life when I wrote Echo and Ramadi, because it is also my story too. Mm-hmm. But that's a decision I made. And I did that only in the hopes that others can learn from it, that it's all right not to be perfect, and that you're going to fall at some point, because I've fallen. But the real measure of success, and this is not just a cliche, Jordan, is that it's picking yourself back up and carrying on with the mission. Yeah. Whatever that mission is, your career or the military or life after the military, that takes discipline, and you have to be, realistic to know that it's going to take discipline to succeed and to carry on, because you owe it to those that went before, that we lost on the battlefield. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your families. And when you reach those points in life that you can almost feel it coming as you lose ground, that traction. But most veterans will ignore it. They'll think that they're impervious to the effects of gravity because we're Marines, right? Nothing's going to bring us down. Yeah. They know this because that's how they're trained. But when you lose traction, that ground underneath you, and make no mistake about it, you're going to land hard. Yeah. And some land harder than others. But when you fall, you can also learn to adjust and continue on. And again, I'll be the first to admit that I had more than my share of struggles and tough decisions, both in combat and afterwards. And there's times when I've lost traction. But despite those punctuated moments of humility, I think they really made me feel more human and allowed me to identify those slippery areas on life that were ahead of me on the road in front of me. So, I just say that because I know there's a lot of listeners that are veterans, or that know people in their families or friends that are veterans, that can maybe have some insight as to what they've gone through and what they deal with it after they return from the battlefield.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
That's a great lesson to take away. I mean, I think, and it's relatable on so many different levels. And I think that's why, it's great. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. I mean, I'm just really looking forward to it, because it just brings that experience so much closer to, civilian life, which, I mean, in some respects, it's like you said, like combat is a very, in many ways, unnatural form to put a human being into, but civilians and people in everyday life often don't realize how much how much they can take away from the experiences of veterans and how much they can look to them as role models, just for solving problems and the everyday battles of life, so to speak. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I feel like that there's a lot of wisdom from people in the military and from previous generations that got thrown out with the hippies a lot of the time. It's like, we don't need any of that stuff. And now we've got the millennials.
Said about me, but again, it comes with a little age and experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they've said other things about me too, but
hey, we all grow, right?
You can't please them all. Yeah.
When you release the book, you gotta put like some links on the site of like, you being dragged down an alley.
BMX tricks
a bunch of jackass type stuff.
I'm sure my brother will post embarrassing photos of me as an adolescent at some point on Facebook or social media. So.
You were talking about Cops earlier. You got any episodes of Cops that you cameoed
in? No, but I could have been. I think I was before the era of Cops. But, I'm sure it would have made prime time with some of the antics and stunts I pulled off.
I'm surprised that show is still being made, especially this day and age. It just seems like it's been on longer than like any other TV show, it seems. It's crazy. It's the original reality show, right? I guess, kind of.
I think so.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm sure there's a reboot that they could gen up if they wanted to.
Speaking of media, I asked this to every veteran who comes on our program because we're movie guys and you're no stranger to Hollywood. I don't know if you like war movies, but like what would you say is maybe the best made war film or series that spoke to your experience as a Marine and a combat veteran?
That's a great question, one I wasn't prepared for, but I think that from film and TV, I think that We Were Soldiers is probably one of my favorite Vietnam era movies that truly depicts not only that chaos and friction on the battlefield, but also the humanity and the struggles that that unit went through. And very, very sad loss this year. Hal Moore passed away, and but he and Joe Galloway did such a phenomenal job with the book, which is 10 times better than any film could have done it justice. But the film was really great. I think, Generation Kill is a good depiction of the grittiness that, Marines and soldiers experience in the urban fight during the long war that we continue to fight today. So there's several good ones out there. I don't think it's ever really the intent for Hollywood in the film industry to portray it 100% accurate, because honestly, I don't think most audiences would watch it for 90 minutes. I think that's just the reality. But I think there are a lot of good projects out there. I think there's a lot of good documentaries that are being produced. Thank You for Your Service, which highlights some of the strife of the VA system and what guys are going through. So there's a lot of good stuff out there, but I found myself reading more as I've gotten older, and as I finished this first book, and I'm also very fortunate to work with a veterans writing project with the Writers Guild in Los Angeles, who takes on a group of veterans, and they donate their time freely. It's an amazing program that I was lucky to be accepted into. And I'm working on my second book, which is another great military story. And another true confession is, one of my mentors asked me after I did a short reading of a synopsis, said, "Wow, Scott, that's amazing." He's like, "When did you realize you had the talent to write like this and capture these stories?" And again, I had to admit, I said, "Well, I wasn't really a great high school student, and I didn't actually read my first book until I was on active duty as a young Lance Corporal in Desert Storm, when somebody sent me a care package, and they couldn't believe it. They said, 'You're kidding, right? How'd you get through high school?' I said, 'Cliff Notes, of course.'" But true confession, did not read my first book until I was a Lance Corporal sitting in a fighting hole in the Middle East, cover to cover.
What book was that?
It was called Guns Up, and it was sent to me in a care package, and it was a little white cardboard box, and usually they tucked some corn nuts and snacks and pencils or something in there. But yeah, it was Guns Up by Johnny M. Clark, and it was a Marine Corps Vietnam paperback that I read, and that was it.
Nice.
Is this is kind of a side note, but do they in care packages? And I feel like I've seen this in the movie. We could talk about Hollywood here. Do they send like grain, like whiskey or like vodka in Listerine bottles over? So that,
I feel like that was a Desert Storm thing, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah, like they dyed it green or something. Like there's stories about
what
that.
movie was that in? I'm trying to remember where I saw that.
Jarhead.
It made Jarhead.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And although that movie's the book by Swafford was did not receive a lot of acclaim and praise because of some of the depictions of hazing and those crazy antics, I'm going to have to say it wasn't far off the mark. And that is not urban legend. That did happen.
Oh, really? Cool.
I can't say it happened to my unit. I don't know if it was going on in my unit as a commander as I moved up the ranks, but I think that, when we fought in the other deployments during OIF and Operation Iraqi Freedom, that wasn't going on, but we were,
right.
No one wanted to risk it. So
no fresh breath. No fresh breath during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Just keep it natural.
Fresh breath was not a priority.
Yeah.
It was not.
Oh, man.
I think I don't know what my record was for not taking a shower during that deployment, but I think it was somewhere around 50 plus days.
Holy crap.
Like but I'm sure there were other Marines in my company that prided themselves on going far longer in a conventional shower than 50 days.
I feel like you would just fuse to your uniform at that point.
You did. You became one with it. The only thing you really ever wanted to change was your socks. And we did get care packages in Ramadi and in Baghdad and other places I fought. But it was socks were usually the best thing. But the niceties that were present in Desert Storm care packages were kind of replaced with the more mission essential gear like socks and T-shirts and hygiene products, and sometimes embarrassing feminine hygiene products that were designed to plug bullet holes if they're wounded. It was interesting. The families and veteran supporters back home were listening to what the Marines and soldiers wanted on the battlefield, and it wasn't comic books. It was things that they needed to survive. So it was pretty cool.
That's crazy. I've used those products to plug nosebleeds before, and they work great. So I assume they'd work well
Jordan, I'm getting a great visual of you right now. An old movie, which is before your time, called Strange Brew.
Oh yeah, that's classic. I mean, I'm originally from Canada, so I know it well.
You are?
Yeah.
Yes, you know the McKenzie brothers
very
well.
They're great. I hope they make a comeback. It's sad to not see Rick Moranis doing stuff anymore, but it'd be cool to see him come back with him and what was it? Was it Dave Thomas? Yeah, him and Dave Thomas.
Yeah, Dave Thomas.
If he plays his cards right, he may end up in season 3 of Stranger Things.
Oh man, you never know. Oh well, thank you so much, Scott, for coming on. We'll have to have you back on as you continue working on projects. But so you've already plugged where people can get your book, but where can people find you if they want to follow you and what you're up to?
So if your listeners want to find out more about me or about the book, you can go to my website at www.echoinramadi.com, or you can find me on Facebook at Echo in Ramadi, or Twitter at Echo in Ramadi, or Instagram or Pinterest at Scott Huesing, or just Google Scott Huesing, Echo in Ramadi. I'm all over social media, and I feel a little bit of testosterone ooze down the inseam of my leg every time I hand someone a business card and ask them to follow me on Facebook at age 47. But it's our new medium, and our president was elected through Twitter, so I can't feel too embarrassed. It's what we do. But there's a lot of great ways your listeners of the program can find out more about me or the book. But go to my website at echoandramadi.com, and there's some great videos that I put together that tell a little bit about the book, and there's some really cool photos of my Marines and the families on there, and gives a little description of me in the book. So, in ways that you can pre-order it now. Your listeners can pre-order on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble. Just go to echoandramadi.com. You can click on the link and purchase your advanced copy.
Awesome. And little known fact, your Pinterest is mostly pictures of ball jars and essential oils, right? Is that what's on there?
Essential oils? I think that might be my wife's Pinterest you may be looking at. Right. She tries to slather me with those essential oils to abate any anxiety I may be expressing.
Oh, yeah.
I just tell her, no, leave me alone.
I don't want to smell like a valley full of lavender.
Hey, don't knock until you try it, Jordan.
I know. I have tried it. It actually puts me to sleep.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. This is the third podcast we've mentioned them.
The diffuser in the background.
Yeah, there you go. You can see it.
Yeah.
I tell you, though, that peppermint oil keeps me awake. That's the thing I use. All right, let's go to a quick... Thanks again, Scott. Let's go to a quick break, and we'll come back with the end of the show. Hey, this part of the show is brought to you by Phoenix Shaving. If you like to shave, and you are a man or a woman, I mean, some women are hairy. That's all right. That's okay. No judgment. But if you're a guy that likes to shave and appreciates the finer things in life, go to gentlemanscofflaw.com/shave. That link helps support the show, and you could check out some of Douglas Smythe's amazing shaving soaps, aftershave colognes. You'll be blown away at all the stuff he has. Scents for days. He is like the Walter White of artisan soap making. He's got this lab basically there in Phoenix, Arizona, where he creates his soaps and he cures them. It's an independent business. You're not giving your money to all those guys that are ripping everybody off with razors. Right now, you can get some wet shaving starter packs. So it has everything you need to get started wet shaving. You know, you can get sets that have the safety razor, the brush, the soap, the aftershave. Tons of great scents to pick from. I've mentioned before, one of my favorites is Tombstone. Also, they have Sundown, which is like a classic barbershop scent. They've got Cavendish, which smells like pipe tobacco, which is amazing. I tell you, I've been using the stuff, and I don't get any razor burn or razor bumps anymore. This stuff is amazing, especially the aftershave. It just removes all irritation, bumps, redness. It's like I've never looked so dapper in my life, and that's thanks to Phoenix Shaving. So go to gentlemanscofflaw.com/shave and stop being a slave to the cartridge razor shave. All right. Another great guest, Scott. We forgot to do it on with him, but thank you for your service, obviously, and anyone who's served our country and is still serving this Veterans Day. You know, think of it. Listen to their stories, like Scott said. You know, give them some time because they've given so much more so that we can be free.
Absolutely.
In this great country. So, John, if people want to support the show, how can they do that?
I will go through this whole thing without mentioning even once the lathe-made cereal bowls. All right. Well, we've got our store, and on that store, we've got what have we got?
We've got
stickers,
t-shirts,
stickers
magnets,
and t-shirts.
We've got pint glasses, flasks. Our flasks are the coolest thing on the store because I've got one of them.
Buttons.
Yeah, they're engraved, right?
Yeah, they're like laser etched. I think. I don't know how they do it, but it's like it's cool because the logo is on there, but it's also looks silver. Like it's not like some of these flasks you buy that it's clearly just like a silk screen or like somebody put a sticker on there. Like it's an actual like it's metallic. I don't know how they do it.
It's
super cool. It's all science. And then all the other cool stuff. So check that out on the shop link at our gentleman'scofflaw.com. And Patreon, if you want to support the show, join us on Patreon. Click the link that says support on our website, and you can see all of the rewards you get for being a patron. It's we got a lot of cool stuff going on there,
Yes, we do.
And you don't want to miss out. I don't think you want to miss out, right, guys?
Yeah, no FOMO.
No way.
No FOMO.
I didn't mean for that to sound like the other thing, but it did.
What does it sound like?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. John, you are a gentleman in the scofflaw, my friend.
You guys are too.
Donovan, you are a gentleman in the scofflaw, my friend.
And both of you as well. And also just a final thank you for your service to all those veterans out there and all those veterans.
Poorman, take us out.
All right, you guys have a great week.
This has been the Gentleman's Scofflaw podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. Visit us on the interwebs at gentlemanscofflaw.com.
Captain says his ice on the river. We ain't getting home if we don't break through. So damn cold, I can't help but shiver. Rise and shine, we got work to